All right, hi everyone. I think it is 1 o'clock. I'm already feeling positive about this as the number of our panelists and our esteemed panelists don't outnumber the people in the crowd. So we're off to a good start. This is National Institutes of Health Career Development K Awards, Why to Apply and How to Succeed. And my name is Christian Pulcini. I am a pediatric emergency medicine doctor at the University of Vermont. For disclosures, Dr. Nick, who you meet in a minute, and I have these disclosures here. He has those disclosures, those ones. And I have from the Pediatric Pandemic Network, which is an interesting new development, a national sort of organization that has brought me on in a consultant role. All right, so our learning objectives today are to describe the rationale and process of applying for a Mentored Career Development Award, to describe applicants and proposals associated with increased likelihood of funding success, and identify common barriers and strategies for overcoming these barriers. As I'm looking out over the crowd, I realize that there are some experienced folks in the crowd, including somebody from the NIH, an NIH program officer. So if you have things to add, we're more than welcome to take your feedback and thoughts. Certainly welcome. This is the the agenda. We're going to give intros. We're going to do like a little poll about where you are in the stages of K Awards. We're going to do an intro to K Awards as well, and then we're going to, this is very backwards. It's supposed to go here, and these are the same thing. I think this ended up being an old slide. So this is the kind of stuff that we're going to do throughout, and I apologize why that is. I'm not sure how that happened. So again, I'm Christian. I have a K-23 that is a mouthful of optimization and implementation trial of a user-centered emergency care planning tool for infants with medical complexity. Happy to tell you about that. It is very pediatric. And I thought Julian, unfortunately, had a plane delay and couldn't join us today. He's at Duke. I think his flight gets in at 1 o'clock, so maybe he'll storm in at about 1:50. But he's also implementation science-based intervention to improve myocardial care in Tanzania, which is an interesting global perspective. And if you're interested in something along those lines, we're more than happy to connect you after this. But Lauren, do you want to stand up and introduce yourself?
Lauren, she, her pronouns. I'm at UMass Chambay State, and I am on the K career pathway of K-12 institutional K. Currently on year 2.75 of a 5-year K-23 from NHLBI. I do the implementation of low-value care and PE research.
Nick Harrison, Indiana University. I study heart failure. I'm currently at the end of a 2-year KL2. Made the decision to start applying for ours instead of going on to the K-23. And yeah.
Michelle Lynn, I'm a health services researcher at Stanford. I'm in year 5 of the K-23, like 4.75. So it ends in July. And it's from the NHLBI examining patient-reported outcomes for adult asthma. I moved a year and a half ago to Stanford, and that required a research pivot. So my first R1 submission was to the National Institute of Teaching. Happy to talk about that.
Cool. And Ambrose Wong from Yale. I have a K-23 from the National Institute of Mental Health, looking at mental health emergencies and looking at agitation events. Prior to that, I had an institutional KL2 for 2 years, so I'm on my 3rd of the 4-year of the K-23, like year 5 or 6.
Elizabeth Schoenfeld, also UMass at Bay State, and I have sadly graduated from my K as of 3 months ago. I wrote a K, but they let me stay this one last time. My K was in shared decision-making, specifically around diagnostic decision-making in kidney stones, but I was able to use it to do a lot of different things in shared decision-making, and my first big kid grant outside of the K was from NIDA about shared decision-making in addiction, methadone, Suboxone.
Can I ask a question real quick? I'm sorry, Bob. This doesn't matter all that much, but are you all physicians or not, or doesn't?
Great question.
Contextualizes it a little bit as I listen.
That's a great question. We are all physicians. All ER docs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Or PED ER docs.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm Courtney Mangus. I'm at the University of Michigan, pediatric emergency medicine clinician. I'm in my first year of a KO8 from AHRQ, also looking at shared decision-making in the community ED setting for pediatric abdominal pain. Okay, so to set the stage a little bit, what is a K award? You may have heard it referred to as a Career Development Award or CDA, and you've heard the alphabet soup of numbers and letters, K08, K23, K12. And this is an award, it's usually a 3 to 5 year award, non-renewable, that provides financial support and 75% protected time to early career faculty. And it's really an investment in the researcher to give them time to grow, gain new skills, conduct research, and develop into a researcher who can then go on for more funding. If you are thinking about a K award, which I gather some of you are because you're here, you're in the right place because you really want to start thinking now about your research questions and talking to other K awardees, learning about the process, their interactions with the different funding agencies, and getting all your questions answered. The research questions are important, but the award, as I mentioned, is really funding you. So it has to be a good research question and a good project for the timeline, but from what I've been told, it's really more funding you and your potential. And so it has to be, your application needs to be a good balance of that. Other things you can do as you're starting to think about this is just browsing the funding opportunity announcements to get a sense of what awards are out there, what the application looks like, what the timeline looks like. The timeline, we're going to talk more about that, is can be a little bit daunting. So familiarizing yourself early with that will be helpful. And then the other really big thing that I think it's as soon as you're sure it's something you want to do or even investigating, talking to your department chair about their support. That's something that will go into the application is a letter from your chair basically confirming that if this is awarded, you will be granted your 75% protected time and that your institution supports you wholeheartedly. And so my understanding is this isn't actually a great investment from your department's standpoint up front because it does cost them some money. But again, the idea is down the line you will be a independent researcher and able to do more research and get more grants after this. But just chat with your chair early on.
Oh, okay.
I left my
Are we
sheet
doing
up
it?
here to wrangle the masses.
Oh, perfect. I'm doing slide 2.
Yep.
Okay.
Next to it.
So I think we've done this talk on a number of occasions in past years, and we realize it's kind of a spectrum of where people are in their K award thoughts. And we've seen people who are sort of in the pre-planning stages or maybe thinking stages all the way to maybe they're already in the resubmission process. So we just kind of wanted to get a poll from you guys in terms of where you're at and what your interests are to come into our panel. And we're hoping to tailor some of our conversations around that. And are we going to do breakouts this year?
We're going to give it a try.
Okay. To maybe,
One-on-ones.
right,
Yeah,
to try to group folks who might be in similar situations where we can spend a little bit more time in small groups talking about some of the details.
Sure.
I guess maybe just a show of hands starting out, maybe thinking very early on, not quite sure what a K is, but have heard that might be something helpful. Can you raise your hand where you're at?
Woo.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Welcome. You deserve a K and you'll get one. And then what about the folks who have already started planning for one, know some basics or know sort of planning to write?
Yeah.
Oh, good, great. Congrats, guys. Now you're getting to the dive and welcome to the pain. And then what about the folks who are either in the process of writing, are going to get submitted but not quite submitted yet? Awesome, that's great. And then what about those who are either in the submission process or waiting for study section review? Awesome, guys. You got it, it's submitted. Okay, cool, so there's actually a really great spectrum, which is awesome sauce. All right, what am I doing here? I guess this is sort of a little bit about the submission process. I'm curious for everyone here that's gotten a K, did you guys get on the first try or do you have to resubmit? I had to resubmit.
Okay.
Resubmission, yeah. So I would say you're like, oh, I'm awesome, I got it on the first try. But I think the majority of us had to resubmit, and I think that's just part of the process. We talk about this a lot in grants, to really think a little bit about the fact that it's going to be a time investment, but that it's also going to be a lengthy process in terms of thinking about the application process. I think if I had learned this better, I would have even given myself even more lag time before I actually applied. There's still, even I think thinking through it, it was still, there were parts of it that I still felt very rushed. And I think the other thinking process too is that it's going to go through some revisions, and also you can potentially repurpose pieces of it either for other grants or to think about some backup plans. Because I think the process with NIH is that there is a high rejection rate regardless of whether the science is good or not. It's a little bit of a numbers game, and it's a little bit of luck sometimes. It's not necessarily about the science. And so it's not really about the fact that you didn't write a good grant. It's a little bit of, there's just so many factors that are not under your control. So I think just thinking about that advantageously and planning that in advance, I think would be really helpful. Anything else to add from the other folks about resubmission? Or?
How many of you guys have had a rejected grant in the double digits?
Many, many.
Well,
Yeah.
Individual grants or how many?
Oh, well, co-I grants too, I guess.
Total grants. Sure.
And although I admitted to all of you that I got the K in the first try, I submitted 13 grants that year, and that's the only one I got, including like a $10,000 like pediatric grant that had harsher feedback than the NIH. I'm not even joking. It just was like, it was a really interesting year of straight rejection. People aren't thinking of that.
Painful.
Yeah.
Isn't that the way to think about it? Mentorship.
So mentorship, this is a really big one, and one of the components that gets scored as part of your K is your mentorship team. So they look at the investigative team, it's not just you, it's you and how supportive your mentorship team and environment are gonna be in contributing to your successful transition to an independent investigator. And this one can be challenging, particularly in emergency medicine. So what does the NIH consider to be I don't want to say appropriate. What would be an ideal primary mentor for a K? So ideally, this is someone who has not only previously mentored K awardees, but more specifically has had K awardees who have gone on to transition to research independence, which means they have also gone on to R1s. So they should be able to list in their mentor letter of support, these are my prior K awardees, this is what they're doing right now, and who has an R01, right? And there's not that many of those people in our specialty, unfortunately. So who has a primary mentor who's not an emergency physician? Yeah, so this is really common. It's rare to have an emergency physician as your primary mentor because it's a really high bar. But you could have an emergency physician co-mentor, even if your primary mentor is outside of your department. They should be at your institution. It's, even though we're in the era of Zoom, you can have plenty of co-mentors outside your institution, but it's, tough to make the case that your primary mentor is going to be able to meet with you, for an hour every week, because that's what your mentoring plan will likely say if you're not actually at the same institution. And like when you think about mentorship, it's just who do you need to get the work done? So these teams can be big. So who has more than 4 people on their mentorship team? More than 5? Yeah, I think I had 5 or 6. Yeah, but it's just like who do you need to get this done? So my mentorship team, because I had a patient-reported outcome validation study, included an emergency medicine primary mentor, an asthma content mentor, a psychometric methods mentor, a geospatial analysis mentor, a patient-oriented, patient-centered research mentor, and a biostatistician, right? That's a huge team, but I looked at each of my aims and all of the things I didn't know how to do that I was going to have to learn in order to accomplish all 3 of my aims, and those were my gaps, and so those were the people who I found to fill those gaps. The letters are going to say that they're going to meet with you, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is that sounds like they're going to need. But in reality, like a lot of them, I've met with more on an ad hoc basis, and people understand that. But I think demonstrating that you have these people who are well established in the field, who are committed to your success, even if what happens in reality is not the same as what happens in your application, is really important.
Did you have a track record with your mentors?
That's a great question. So a lot of people move, right? So between residency, fellowship, and being your first faculty job, which is might or might not be when you're applying for your K. I had no published publications with all but one of those 6 mentors. And so that was my opportunity between my first and second submission. In fact, I actually only had 2 peer-reviewed publications on my first submission, which I had a lot of imposter syndrome about, but it's okay, guys, it all works out. Neither of them were in asthma either. But between that first and second submission, I was able to submit, several abstracts and get like 8 more publications, like most of whom included at least my primary mentor, but at least a couple of my co-mentors to show that, okay, yeah, even though I am brand new, I just moved to this institution, I've not really had the opportunity to work with this person, we're working together now, and they are committed to my success, and I've been super productive, I swear. If you know ahead of time, if you're gonna move somewhere, throw them on your abstract, ask them for feedback. It's a great way to demonstrate that track record because they will look at your biosketch and your mentor's biosketch to see which publications and highlight them. They should be like at the top of the list and like the section where you can highlight key recent publications and projects. Yeah.
So in non-training grants, your team is mostly co-Is and consultants and that style of involvement. On a K then, are all of those people on the mentorship team?
Yeah. None of them get paid.
Or advisors.
Yeah.
I had, like, my biostatistician, my audit feedback, and implementation science folks, they were advisors, I had like 3 mentors, and then the rest were advisors, because they didn't have the time to commit to a lifted paper, but I could use them.
Yeah.
I did pay consultants. I had a
Yeah, I did, yeah.
urologist and I had a graphic design type of person that I paid as consultant. But there's so little money for that particular bucket, so you can come in.
Yeah.
And something, I think the mentors are supposed to be aligned with your training plan as well, which we'll
Yeah.
get into. And so they should be more senior folks who have some established expertise and feel that you're trying to learn in your training goals. And so then that's why your mentors are supposed to be complementary to flesh out that training plan. If it's folks that you're going to collaborate with because you need to exact the science to a certain part, they don't really serve a mentor role. They can be either, but they may serve some kind of expertise in your advisory board, or if they're really just statisticians or someone that's a trade craft, then you might pay them within the consulting fee. So there's sort of different tiers for where you want to include it on.
Yeah.
If your project has there's a need for a skill set that you don't have, you can't provide, you can have someone who's more traditional co-I or consultant on that. You just have to be able to justify why that particular skill isn't something that you're also training in.
Yeah.
So I think Liz's example of the urologist is a great one. She's not going to become a urologist. So no one's going to look at that and be like, well, she didn't list urology residency on her training plan and this urologist isn't part of that.
Well, I guess how many of you had co-investigators on your K?
No, but you can hear.
Yeah, right? That's not what you do. Yeah. And your primary mentor can't take effort. You can have a consultant, a couple, right? And then everyone else that gives in-kind effort.
Yeah, that's good clarification. These are not co-Is in the standard sense. They're not budgeted FTE, they're helpers.
So in previous years, we actually went through our journeys to a K, just to illustrate, because we all had different journeys. This year, we're going to highlight one in the interest of doing the breakouts. So Nick is going to go through his journey. I just kind of looked through his last year one and liked how much effort he put into making this.
Well, I'm going to give actually full credit to Dr. Schoenfeld because I took hers as the example, and then maybe want to look crazy with it, but. This is a sort of tongue-in-cheek. Obviously, these lines are not I didn't make this in R, if you can't tell that this was in PowerPoint. But, I wanted to kind of, tie together, I think a lot of the things that we've said here is that there's a lot of individual items that you really need. So one of the things that Courtney mentioned is you need institutional buy-in. And the reason why you need institutional buy-in is K awards cost a lot of money. They cost literally millions of dollars if you're a physician scientist to your department, that your department will lose that money. They ostensibly are gaining it back by training you as a, independent scientist, but you need that investment, and that means protected time. So like for me, I did a 2-year research fellowship at Wayne State with, my primary mentor was Phil Levy, and then Rob Ehrman was also a mentor of mine studying heart failure. I had 75% protected time for 2 years there, got my master's in biostats at the University of Michigan, then started a faculty year at Indiana University where I took my first position, got the 2-year CTSI KL2 K12 award, and went back up to 75% protected time. And that, starting at residency graduation 2019, I've had 5 years now of 75 to 50% protected time. And like, that is the only way that any of this other stuff works. So including being able, especially the babies, like being able to submit, smiley faces and sad faces. You can see lots of grants that were submitted that weren't successful, then lots of happy faces. This actually wasn't updated from this year, so there's a couple more after that. I submitted my first R01 in February, and then another one going out soon. And like none of that is possible if you don't have the protected time. Same thing with pubs, and particularly pubs that are, usable on a biosketch is like actually probably not a great way of putting it, but publications that show that you can put on a biosketch to make the claim and make the argument that like, I am someone who has the skill set that you can trust to give $5 million to in an ESI R01. We'll see if that actually happens or not. I don't know. But that's, the point, like the underlying point there is you need time to build that up. Jeff Klein once, I once asked Jeff Klein what that meant, and he said, well, that's 21st authored publications in your exact field of study. I don't know if that's 100% true, but it is a lot. Like it is a lot of publishing in your area on a very, very, very focused track of what you're studying. So it's clear to someone reading your biosketch when you're submitting your first, non-mentored federal awards that people understand, hey, this guy has been building to this. He has the skill set, he has the knowledge, and like, it's also, we can trust that if we think his idea or her idea is good, we can trust that they're actually going to be able to do it, more not.
That being said, you're going to get expertise in different methods as well as different content area. So there was no complaints on my K was about shared decision making for kidney stones. My R34 is about shared decision making for addiction, and there was no qualms about me as an investigator on either the first submission or the second submission. So you just make the argument that what you did before translates to this new area.
I'm gonna. Dr. Maurer is gonna.
Lawyer rhymes with destroyer. I'm sorry if I reviewed any of your grants. I think one thing that you made the point before that, like the department's investing millions of dollars in you. I think you have to make that, maybe like, I don't know if everybody completely gets that. Are there any department chairs in the room? You're a department chair? I used to. But you're not now? Okay, so I'm not a department chair. I don't want to be one. It seems like very unpleasant, but whatever. But when they're making these investments, like not every place does it the same way, but the structural thing is that the K is giving approximately 90% to cover 75% of your salary. You're hopefully getting a job where you're making more than $90,000 a year. Mm-hmm. If you are getting a job where you're only making $90,000 a year, then they're not actually, the chair isn't losing anything for you being on that K. Most people hope to make more than $90,000 in their positions. And then even if you become a fully funded researcher later, the department also, like if you have 80% of your research effort funded, there's an NIH salary cap, which is better than $90,000. It's roughly $200,000. But my department chair is spending money on the delta between my salary and the NIH salary cap that could be paying people like Courtney working overnight shifts and things like that. So like they're balancing things in terms of doing this to make this investment in you. And not every place is going to handle it the same way. There are some places that will pay you less if you're on the research track as part of like sort of meeting in the middle in this. So just so you know, like that's the structural thing about this is having a supportive department. And when you're saying that, and you said before that like, you know, they're going to blow $5 million on you or whatever.
Well, not blow, but
I mean, but they're investing in you.
They're investing in
right?
you.
Like there's a variety of things they can invest in, and that's, you know, it's important though. But you all are super valuable. You're doing great scientific work, so it is okay to be invested in.
yeah. The big thing is just like make sure that you have a department. This is why Courtney mentioned talk to your chair ahead of time, because not every place and every chair is going to understand that math. Like the reality, there aren't that, what was it that Dr. Numar cited as the most recent statistic in the plenary is like 146 NIH funded investigators in emergency medicine. And like where our goal was 4% of departments. So there's a lot of chairs out there who don't have any NIH funded investigators, let alone any K awardees. So they don't necessarily, like you need to talk that over for them so they can understand what they're getting into in that investment.
But also, 45 departments.
45.
And I would say if you're applying for a job to state explicitly in your cover letter that that's what your plan is, because that will weed out a bunch of chairs who aren't able to or aren't interested in supporting that, and make it really clear, you know, financially what they're getting into, and talk to us. I mean, show who works in the department where the researchers make a different salary than the non-researchers? I do not. So, I mean, you should understand what the market is, and all of us will share with you how many hours we work, how we negotiate that. We have spreadsheets like showing what different people do across the country. Like, you know, this is information that we are all happy to share, but have that conversation up front before you submit your application with your chair.
Yeah.
I think that that's a key point when you're looking for like a job or where you want to go, you know, you want to do research or research fellowship, looking at places that you can see like how many people have had K supported in that department. What is their plan for that cap? They called the cap gap, where that money between the NHLBI or NIH, whatever the institute, the max that they'll pay, and what it actually costs to have you work 75%, not in the ED clinically. So like, do they have a plan for that? How do they feel about it? And are they willing to be visible?
Dr. Moyer and then.
Well, no, I was just going to say like, there's these sort of two models though in terms of thinking about places to work. There's a model like this place gets it, they know to do it, and one of the problems with our specialty is that we don't have enough places that actually have it. So I know that Margaret Greenwood, who'd been one of our clinical research fellows at the University of Michigan, went to New Mexico, and even though nobody there had really done it in emergency medicine, and very few people actually in other specialties, she had the support of the chair there and really like did an amazing job. So you don't have to just say like, oh gosh, I gotta go live in Ann Arbor. It seems like cold and dark there. Like, I mean, we'd be happy to have you, but although we don't even know who our chair is, so like that's a thing. But don't think of it. But there's a place that's got a good medical school. Even if they haven't had a lot of K awardees, don't rule it out. Particularly, but again, ensure that you have the ability to have a primary mentor there. Because if you don't have a primary mentor at the institution, it's not gonna work.
I wouldn't take a job without a mentor, actually.
Yeah. And I mean, that's how, like talking about the difference between physicians, physician scientists and PhD scientists, that's how PhD students look out for jobs. They look for, hey, where is there someone with a mentor, not just what is the name of the place, and they contact the mentor. Anyway.
I think why don't we take one more question, then we're going to get in the group breakouts just to benefit the folks who are here to give some tailored advice.
Kind of a related question about the structure of CapGap and kind of how that gets paid back on the back end later. So it sounds like both at the K and potentially the R level, it sounds like there are still gaps in terms of the funding mechanism. So where is that money eventually coming back to the department where that makes sense for them?
Yeah. So, all right, so I do want to say one thing is that if you go to a place that hasn't had Ks yet, it doesn't necessarily have to come out of the budget of your department because that department is in a larger institution. So if you can figure, if your chair, it's not necessarily a job for you, if your chair can figure it out with the larger institution, if the institution wants to support research, this is a way to support research. Particularly if it's a place that wants to grow research but cannot attract mid-career investigators, which by the way is every place. There are very few places that can hire mid-career investigators away from other places. And those places generally don't need them because they're already doing very well. So if it's got a med school, if it's got other things above and outside of emergency medicine, then that is a fun way to do it. So the way that, that my gap was funded was basically that we had enough other funded investigators that there's more nuance to this, but that there was enough other funded investigators that their indirects from their bigger grants came in, but that is a higher level conversation, and the people running our Office of Research had to negotiate with the hospital about how much of the indirects did they get. So you recall, the indirects keep the lights on, the med school takes this percentage of them, the hospital then takes this percentage of them, the SPA, Sponsored Programs Administration, takes this percent. So how much actually comes back to the department or the chair or someone else to decide that they have money to deal with it? I mean, one of the reasons not to be too cynical that they're going to invest in you is that the indirects that you are going to bring in later when you become an independently funded investigator should hopefully be then supporting the next cadre of K awardees. So theoretically, that's where it comes from. I know that sometimes the med schools, it can be different.
So some departments don't see any indirects. So it's like so often the investigators are subsidized by clinical revenue generated by the non-research faculty. And actually we took a proposal to our chair, but then took it to the dean, was why don't we have the medical school support the cap gap? Because there's only like 2 or 3 of us at any given time. And he's like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to go ask. And then they said yes. And it was less costly for the department because for the dean it was a priority. So that's something you can certainly ask.
And I'll just add one other model that I haven't seen much in emergency medicine, but I'm also in our Department of Neurology, and they have different problems and less. But anyway, the way that they address it is actually through philanthropy, like endowed career development professorships to do that. Again, it's in emergency medicine, we do our job right. Like people aren't so appreciative, but they go die for many years of ALS. Like they just love those people and give them tons of money. Not to say that I'm bitter, but but as a stroke doctor, it's like yeah, you walk out of the hospital normal, but they don't bring me a big check to down with the professorship. So I'm sad, but that is another potential model. It's something like it'd be great if we had more of an emergency medicine. Certainly, it's hard, right? Like. We're just there to take care of the patients of the day, but if that is a model departments can use if they have happy people who are opening up checkbooks.
Thank you. That was a very thorough answer.
All right, we're going to split up now into groups. So there are going to be 4 groups, but if there are people here that don't have things that fit on one of these groups that have questions, we can split up and things don't have to be 2 of us. So over here is going to be don't know what a K is, but here it's good, want to know more about it. That's going to be over here with Michelle and Ambrose.
Hey, Bill, can you do it? Yeah, nice.
Where did Ambrose go?
Yeah, that's right.
Ambrose had an oral presentation. Bill, a graduate of the K Club, is going to substitute in.
A K alumni from UMass Chambay State. Thinking about starting the process and know the basics will be Christian and Courtney over here. In that back is going to be Schoenfeld started the process, but not yet submitted. And then Nick and I will be back in this corner. You've submitted, maybe you've submitted many times, waiting, something, thinking about another route, we'll be back there.
If you have a K, Ryan, look at you, or you have other expertise, just choose a group that you would like to give your expertise to, because we would love to have it.
All right, team, just because we want to end on time, you don't necessarily have to reorganize. I'm just going to keep talking on the mic because it's louder than all of you. Elizabeth, you actually, we have you up here to talk about local efforts and national efforts for bolstering research briefly if you want. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let me change the slides for the feedback slides, so I apologize.
So the feedback, as you walk out the door, give us feedback. Also, what else you want to see. And then up earlier, I don't know if you go back to the other, do you want to go back to the other QR codes? We go back a little bit.
Where is it?
It's a different one. Just keep going backwards. Yeah, so this
Nice, thanks.
is going to be useful. So, and if you, I don't know, Ryan, have a recently successful K, please put it on here. So we have a Google folder with 24 successful K awards. Now, what's that? I thought we put all the other ones in. Or just, oh no, we have a list. We have a list of successful K awards and then a bunch of the actual awards. But we have a list of people and contacts for the last 10 plus years.
And all of their contact info is in there, and obviously it's not a guarantee that they'll share their K awards, but they put their name on the
And someone said a great thing yesterday, which was never write a grant from start, right? Like it's 150 pages. Use somebody else's stuff for templates, right? This is what this is supposed to look like. This is what this is supposed to look like. Obviously, starting with someone's successful K is a great way to do it. That being said, the rules do change. So if you're borrowing from my K from 2018 or whatever it was, just make sure that I followed what the current rules are in terms of like what you can say and what you can't say. But what I found is that people are pretty friendly and happy to share, and we want more people in this little club of ours, so by all means. A lot of us have kicked around the idea of SAM trying to start some more supportive groups. I think the way that we're starting to conceptualize it is a pre-K club for the people right up until you get the K, and then as soon as you get the K, you are now in the K to R club. Sorry to put the pressure on you, but you know the point of the K is to get the next grant, which I know seems a little rat racy. But the K to R club has a lot in common, so I think we're talking about trying to put together these two groups, and obviously everybody in this room belongs in those groups in one place or another. So definitely keep in touch, and we will keep in touch with you. Last questions for the group, or comments, or anything that we can do? Look at Ambrose. Oh, the other thing we would love to hear from you is suggestions for other didactics that would be useful for you next year. We have, there's one, which I think everyone here is actually maybe too advanced for on Friday, about navigating NIH, and it's called Zero to Hero. There was also an RO1 one today. There's a bunch of other stuff, but what are we missing, and how can we help and have that for you via SAM? Questions? All right. Well,
We ended a minute early.
Oh my God, we're amazing. Yay!